Well, here we are. We're back. Women on the edge. Little on the edge here in Texas because it is hotter than hell. It's in the hundreds of hundreds. We're just shooting for some big numbers this week, but seems kind of appropriate temperature for what we're going to be talking about this week because we have some heat going off in this Bible story, and we're going to talk about a couple women and a cool story that's a crazy story that definitely should be made into a movie, just like a lot of these Bible stories. And we're going to talk about Athaliah, but not just Athaliah. We're actually going to talk about someone else. This is our Shady Ladies series. We did Jezebel and that crazy story of her and King Ahab in our last lesson. And this shady lady is Athaliah. But there's a lot more to this story than just one pagan, godforsaken, crazy, wicked woman. There's a little bit more to it. So we're going to take a deep dive, get your Bibles ready and your pen ready to take notes if you're doing that. And we're going to take a dive in. So storytelling, we love in storytelling that a good evil queen. I mean, if you got a good evil queen in your Disney movie, in your fantasy, sci-fi, in even in your Western, you can come up with some evil, wicked woman. But the evil queen is always a good one. And whether you're in Narnia or Disney, it's a good one. They're terrifying and clever, and are usually trying to get rid of anything or anyone that they believe stands in the way of their power. And a lot of times they're portrayed as these beautiful women who are jealous of anyone else being beautiful. That's always kind of the Snow White kind of version of it, but it's really always about power with women. Actually, it's about power with everybody, but we're talking about evil queens today. Evil queens are usually written as cold and sadistic, cruel, extremely vain, and their stories are supposed to teach us about the dangers of pride and narcissism, overconfidence. Like, oh, I got this, everybody's fine, they're all bowing down to me, not realizing that behind the scenes people are trying to bring her downfall about. But the stories that we see are always supposed to, they're hopefully going to teach us something, but it's usually the extreme negative character qualities that these queens have, and a lot of times some people are like, oh, I can't relate to that. I've never had multiple people killed, or tried to kill my stepdaughter with an apple, or tried to skin Dalmatian puppies or something, anything like that, or been an ice queen in the middle of a frozen tundra like in Narnia. But there have been some really absolute evil queens in true world history, and if you want to look a few of them up, I looked up to see who are some of them evil queens in history, and here's just a weird little list. You may have heard of some of them. Of course, if we studied American literature and English literature, we know about Bloody Mary, and that's her portrait down there. And there's some other crazy ones, Isabella of Spain, and these are mostly like Asian and especially European queens. They did some really horrible evil things. One of them had just people they found in the basement. One of them is kind of known as, they think she might kind of had like a vampire kind of an issue about her. Just a crazy, horrible, evil queen. So there really have in real life been some evil women who have done some horrible things. You don't usually tend to think of the ones in power. That's usually men are in power in world history of a country or a nation. But sometimes a woman, just like in this story today, a woman does get into power, and she can be just as horrible and evil. They are known for their cruelty, these real women, and their godless inhumanity. So the story today is about another evil queen you have likely heard of, and the woman who defeated her, a woman you may never have heard of. I hate to throw him under the bus, but my husband asked me who we were discussing tonight, and I told him, and then I told him the second name, and he didn't know who I was talking about. So he's going to have to do a little Bible reading this week. Maybe watch my lesson. I'm sure he's read the story. I know he's heard of Joash and all that stuff, but sometimes the name of this wonderful good person in the story, a lot of people have not heard her name, and she's not as recognizable, which is sad for Christianity. Many of us have lived in and around a dysfunctional family. We've been, we've got divorces, we've got crazy different traumas that some of us have dealt with in our families. And often within these sorts of families are two different ways of looking at the world. It can be religion that divides a family, or politics, or a family could be dealing with just different ideas of how to parent, or how to raise children, or how to just go about life. And of course, even abuse can cause obvious dysfunction in a family as well. Our story today, we got all those things. All of that stuff is in this story. And so I'm just saying all these things just to try somehow to kind of maybe put some sort of personal way that we can connect with this story, because it's hard for us to think of kings and queens and ancient history, but there is we can understand power, and we can understand evil, and we can understand just meanness, and we can understand some of this other stuff. So try to find some connection here. Okay, so Athaliah and Jehosheba. These are the two main women we're going to be talking about today. Athaliah is the only sole reigning queen of Judah. She is the only one in our Bible history who ever reigned all by herself, and she was the queen of Judah. Now we're going to go into this a little bit more, but there's two kingdoms within Israel. There's Judah and Israel. We're going to talk a little bit more about that. And her stepdaughter, very courageous stepdaughter, Jehosheba, is the way we're going to put it here. Some different Bible translations spell her name a little bit differently, but we're going to go with Athaliah and Jehosheba for this lesson. So these two are our main characters. These are the players in this tale. So we have Athaliah. She reigned for 6 years, both as the first and only female monarch of the ancient kingdom of Judah. And she was not in the line of King David. That's a very important point in this story. Jehosheba was Athaliah's Jehosheba, her husband's daughter from another wife. So it's her stepdaughter. Yes. So remember, kings could have a bunch of wives. Athaliah was married to Jehoram. Well, there'll be a thing of this in just a second. And he had another wife, and she had a daughter. So that's Jehosheba. She committed a single-handed act of bravery that led to a coup, an eventual coup, and then eventually Athaliah's assassination and King David's line being restored. Very, very important. All those words don't make sense yet, but they will, because of what Athaliah did. You may have heard the story, and then what Jehosheba did counteracted it. Jehoiada is Jehoshaba's husband. He was a chief priest, and he devised and executed this coup that ended up taking place. Okay, so this is where we are, 2nd Chronicles and 2nd Kings. Both stories, the story is in both places. Chronicles and Kings are kind of a repeat of each other. It's kind of a weird thing. Kings is sort of a step-by-step kind of thing. Chronicles is like the big repeat, like here's the highlight reel of all the stuff that we're supposed to be telling you about, but it's also a lot of repetition. A lot of the lines are kind of almost exactly the same descriptions, but to find out everything you need to know, you got to kind of read it in both places. So we go back and forth. So here's a little bit of better understanding. So Athaliah was born in the northern kingdom. Her grandfather was Omri, and he captured the throne of Israel. And then her father was the infamous King Ahab of Israel. Jezebel was his wife, but Jezebel was probably not her mother. There is a little discrepancy. There are a few people who think that Athaliah might have been Omri's daughter, but most people think that it was probably her grandfather. So her father was probably Ahab. That's not a good dad to have. I'm just saying, y'all, not good. Okay, so let's look at this little chart. Okay, I made a little family tree for you here. Israel, the northern kingdom up here. Can you see my little arrow thing? Can y'all see that? I'm moving it around. Okay, so Israel up here had 10 tribes, and then Judah was down. They had Jerusalem as their capital. Israel was where Ahab and Jezebel and all them were, the northern kingdom. Ahab and Jezebel. Okay, and you can see the little arrow. They had 2 kids. We talked about them in our last lesson. They had, well, 2 of them, they had a bunch of kids, probably Ahab had a bunch of kids, but the 2 that we know of that became kings, Joram and Ahaziah. There's actually going to be another Ahaziah because apparently naming, they just liked that name and they would just name other. So Athaliah, she eventually has a kid and she names him Ahaziah too. But for this story, Ahab and Jezebel have 2 kids. They both end up becoming kings. They both end up getting killed off. But these are their 2 kids. Oh, Ahab had other wives, and by one of these other wives, he also had Athaliah. So she is a princess. She's a big deal, Athaliah was. King Ahab, Athaliah's dad, is just vilified in the Bible for something called syncretism. That's the way I'm going to pronounce it. Syncretism is a great word if you want to be super important and impress people with your theology knowledge. It's the combining the worship of Yahweh, our one true God that we follow in the Bible, with other gods. So what Ahab did, and then eventually a lot of people throughout Israel and Judah, what they were doing was they would use Yahweh for all the important stuff that they needed. They would follow most of his words and his plans, but if they needed a little extra attention, they would go over and they would do a little sacrifice to Baal or to an Asherah pole or something like that. So they were combining these gods. And his wife Jezebel, who had come from another land, she it says in the word that she influenced him even more so to do that. He was already a bad guy. The scriptures very clearly say he was a bad dude. Then Jezebel, she just pushed him right over the edge. Jezebel was this Phoenician princess whose father and mother were probably high priests within their culture as well as king and queen. She married Ahab for this political alliance because of his daddy Omri. So she became Athaliah's stepmom and mentored her to become a zealous follower of Baal and other Phoenician gods. It says that in the word that Athaliah is the way she is because of her mama, stepmama. Then there comes this political alliance that these 2 kingdoms want to make. Jehoshaphat, so we got Omri and Jehoshaphat, the northern kingdom and the southern kingdom. Jehoshaphat was down there in Israel. He was a great king. We all love Jehoshaphat. Yay, Jehoshaphat. He was the king of Judah. King Ahab ended up being taken over for his daddy Omri up in Israel, and he was bad dude. Ahab gave Athaliah in marriage to Jehoshaphat's heir, Jehoram. So Jehoshaphat had a kid, and they decided they wanted these 2 kingdoms to have a nice connection. So they made a deal with Athaliah and Jehoram, the kids, to seal their alliance and keep the skirmishes from happening, which they eventually had some anyway. So here's a nice little chart. So Israel had the northern kingdom, and Ahab and Jezebel and Athaliah. Now that's not actually their kid together, but the 2 of them ruled Israel, and then Athaliah was a kid that came out of it. Judah had Jehoshaphat, and then he had the kid Jehoram, and they're like, oh, we got these 2 kids. Let's get them married to each other, which actually went against biblical principles, biblical rules. They were not supposed to be doing what they did by connecting these 2, but they did. So they get married. So then we have Jehoram and Athaliah are in the Judah South Kingdom, and they have a kid also named Ahaziah, like their kid up here was named Ahaziah. So they have this kid Ahaziah, very important part of the story. So now the story is set. We've got these 2 kingdoms are connected through marriage. Jehoram and Athaliah are married. They start having little babies. Athaliah was a daughter and a stepdaughter of the most wicked pair of rulers in Bible history, Ahab and Jezebel. Daddy and stepmommy were the worst, and Athaliah decided to up the game a little bit. So she becomes the queen of Judah of the South. She marries Jehoshaphat dies. Jehoram becomes the king, and she is Queen Mama. She is the big bad queen. She then seems to follow in her stepmom's footsteps and converts her husband to the worship of these Phoenician gods. Even though Solomon had begun the worship of foreign gods, and this led to the land of Israel being split into two kingdoms. The kingdom of Judah had, for the most part, because they had Jehoshaphat, they had stuck with Yahweh. That was good. And only then, every once in a while, they dabbled with worshiping Asherah. They hadn't even really gotten into the good old Baal worship yet. And I'm being facetious, but they were pretty much Yahweh, Team Yahweh. Jehoshaphat kept them on the straight and narrow. Jehoram marries Athaliah. Not a good combination, and they go the wrong way. Athaliah showed herself to be a wicked queen, just like Queen Jezebel of Israel, her mother. Queen Athaliah was a bad, everybody say bad, influence on her husband, King Jehoram, because she turned his heart away from following the very godly life of his dad, King Jehoshaphat. She influenced him to worship idols, build high places like she'd been taught to do in her family, the family of Ahab. And it says in the 2 Kings, he, Jehoram, her new husband, followed the ways of the kings of Israel, that's the bad people, as the house of Ahab had done, for he married a daughter of Ahab. He did evil in the eyes of the Lord. Everybody with me so far? Raise your hand, scream, yell, jump up and down. If you're not, sorry. It's a lot of names, a lot of kingdoms, and it can be a little difficult. So Jehoram, he's being king. Everything's great. He's got this wife. He's making little baby kings. And because of the sins of Athaliah's husband, though, King Jehoram, the Lord inflicted him with a bowel disease. And he suffered from the disease. And he only, for 2 years. And it says in 2 Chronicles, after all this, the Lord afflicted Jehoram with an incurable disease of the bowels, y'all. Oh, my goodness. In the course of time, at the end of the 2nd year, his bowels came out because of the disease. Depending on which translation you're reading, it has a very descriptive way of explaining that. Came out of him, and he died in great pain, I can imagine. His people made no funeral fire in his honor as they had for his predecessors. Jehoram was 32 years old when he became king, and he reigned in Jerusalem 8 years. He passed away to no one's regret and was buried in the city of David, but not in the tombs of the kings. Tells you a lot. One sentence, one phrase tells you a lot. To no one's regret. When King Jehoram died, their son Ahaziah was made king. But Queen Athaliah, she did not seem to be satisfied with causing the downfall of her husband. She proceeded to negatively influence her son, King Ahaziah, to his downfall. It says also in 2 Chronicles, he, Ahaziah, also walked in the ways of the house of Ahab, for his mother was his counselor to do wickedly. Wherefore he did evil in the sight of the Lord, like the house of Ahab, for they were his counselors after the death of his father to his destruction. Wow, you guys. What a legacy this woman has. When Jehoram died and her son Ahaziah became king, she became the highest status woman in the kingdom. As the mother of the reigning king, she outranked any of the wives and concubines of her son and was an extremely powerful woman. But her son Ahaziah only reigned for 1 year. When he was 22, he was assassinated by Jehu. Remember that story from last lesson? Who had usurped the throne of Israel, killing both the king of Israel and Judah on the same day. Go back and check out my lesson on Jezebel. I go a little bit deeper, but I'm going to tell you that story a little bit. But this is when the story gets really interesting. King Joram, that was the king of Israel, Ahab and Jezebel's son, and King Ahaziah had been together. They said, hey, we're going to fight. Our kingdoms are going to come together. We're going to fight another bad guy, another bad king. Let's hang out together while we're fighting. Well, they both get wounded and they need to recover in camp. So they go to their camp and they're recovering. And this was unbeknownst to them, though. Jehu was at that time getting anointed by Elisha because God had finally said, enough with Jezebel and this whole kingdom down here. Jehu, I want you to take over. I'm anointing you as king. And he didn't waste any time. He goes and he immediately assassinates everybody. He assassinates both those kings because they just happened to be together. He assassinates both kings of these kingdoms. And then that day or at that same time, he also encouraged the assassination of the queen mother of Israel, Jezebel. And also he needed to be sure that no one else could claim this throne in up in Israel. In Jezreel, in the capital, he ended up having the 70 boys and young men in the royal family rounded up and beheaded. So he did quick work to make sure that he could become king without anyone having any claim to the throne. This is just how you did it. Upon hearing the news of her son Ahaziah's death, Athaliah takes no time to mourn, but does what any good mother would do, and she cleans house. It says, when Athaliah, the mother of Ahaziah, saw that her son was dead, she proceeded to destroy the whole royal family. This is how we know Athaliah the best. She just goes slap dab crazy. She does exactly what Jehu did, except Jehu was doing it as a coup, and not that really. One of them was doing it under the obligation of the Lord. The other one was doing it for her own evil reasons. And she proceeded to destroy the whole family. One way or the other, a whole lot of people were dying, whether you like it or not. Everybody's dying. Queen Mother Athaliah seized the throne of Judah and ordered the execution of all possible claimants to the throne, meaning her own grandchildren. After you read this passage in 2 Kings, you feel astounded, you're sick, you're angry, you're like, what is happening? It just wipes out everyone. You kind of, and what happens is there's this thing with us when we think of a woman, we think, oh, a woman is more nurturing, she's going to be more caring. We can get it. Oh, Jehu, he's known for his power. He's known for the way he drives his chariot, and he's like a man of action, and he's really intense. So it's like you kind of like give him some sort of pass that he executed all those family members of Jezebel and Ahab, and with her, it's different. We go, oh, totally different. She just needed that power herself. But what's up with the woman? I mean, why isn't she being nice? But here's the thing, though. After you read this phrase, she destroys the whole royal family. Then I love the period. I love that moment where you're trying to figure out what happened right there at that period, because the very next phrase is this: but Jehosheba. In church, sometimes the pastor sometimes will say things like "but God," and everybody knows what that means. No matter what the situation, no matter how crazy it is, but God, he can handle it. He's going to do something for us, for the congregation, for the people, for the city, the nation. But God, we have our reliance, our faith is in him. Well, in this sentence, we have but Jehosheba. That's a big but too. But Jehosheba, she was the daughter, like I said, of King Jehoram, Athaliah's husband, and another wife in his harem. So she was half sister to Athaliah's son, Ahaziah, the one who had just been killed by Jehu. Although Athaliah was Jehoram's chief wife, Athaliah was Jehoram. He practiced polygamy, of course. So there were other kids. So here's my little chart. So Jehoram, this is in the South Kingdom, down there. That was supposed to be the good kingdom with Jehoshaphat, but here's his the kid, Jehoram and Athaliah. They have a kid, Ahaziah. Okay, well, Jehoram also has other wives, and he has another kid, at least one of them that we know of, the name Jehosheba. So when Ahaziah is killed, Athaliah takes over, and she says, I'm going to make sure everybody involved over here is taken out. Now, Jehosheba, at some point beforehand, she had been married off to Jehoiada. These are some crazy names, y'all. I hope you're keeping up. There will be a test later. No, I'm just kidding. She'd married this guy. He was a priest, and he ended up eventually becoming the high priest in Jerusalem. And so he's a really big deal, and we don't really know why. In my imagination, it could be that she happened to be, followed in her grandfather Jehoshaphat's footsteps, and she knew the ways of the Lord. It could have just been that they were placating the temple, the team Yahweh. Hey, we'll give you seem to need a bride. We're going to give you a bride, and just keeping them happy. Of course, not realizing, how things were going to change quickly. But for whatever reason, Jehosheba marries Jehoiada, which is a little funny because Jehoiada is like 100 years old, and she was probably about 13, 15, 17 years old when she got married off, just based on tradition. We don't know that for sure, but we do know that he was just short, from my calculations, just short of 100 years old, because there's a reference later to him being 130 when Joash dies, and he'd been in power for about 40 years. It said Jehoiada grew old when he reached the age of 130, he died. So just doing a little back math, I'm not great at it, but yeah, he was around 190 to 100 when he married Jehosheba. So interesting. Quite a couple they made. But here, let's go back to this phrase, but Jehosheba. She was a princess, the wife of the chief priest. She had lived in the world of royalty, security, pleasure. She had seen those around her worshiping pagan gods. She married someone and most likely also worshiped Yahweh. I heard her name means something really cool, but I can't remember what it is. Something about worshiping Yahweh or something. But yeah, so she was connected with Yahweh, Team Yahweh the whole way, and she'd been a princess. She understood this world. She understood that both of these worlds, the world of being a big deal. The wife of the chief priest is a really big deal. You're recognized. People know who you are. You're not hiding anywhere. And also as a princess. So she understood this world. And the morning that she woke up to hear of her brother, the king's death, she probably knew immediately things are going to get much worse. It's just not, oh, my bro died. It's going to get really bad really quick, because she knew probably a little bit that was going on in her in the queen mom's head. When Athaliah began her murdering rampage, she had a choice. Apparently, she was pretty good at making quick decisions, because she took quick action. It says, when Athaliah, the mother of Ahaziah, saw that her son was dead, she proceeded to destroy the whole royal family. But Jehosheba, the daughter of King Jehoram and sister of Ahaziah, took Joash, son of Ahaziah, and stole him away from among the royal princes. So that's Athaliah's grandson, actual direct line to the throne, and stole him away from among the royal princes who were about to be murdered. So y'all, I mean, that's like, it's not like he was like over like 10 miles away and she was like, oh, send him a messenger. She somehow got in with all the other ones who were apparently like lined up, ready to be murdered. And she put him and his nurse in a bedroom to hide him from Athaliah, so he was not killed. He remained hidden with his nurse at the temple of the Lord for 6 years while Athaliah ruled the land. It says that she was hidden in a bedroom. Josephus says that it was more like a storage place for beds and bedroom things. And it's possible that's they were hidden there for the 6 years, but they were hiding. I kind of picture them like back, like a whole bunch of mattresses like lined up against the wall, and they're like back behind, and like some bedding and a whole bunch of stuff in the room, and they're like, there's nothing in here, there's nobody hiding in here, and they just keep walking by, and they're like, they kept going back there hidden in not just like in a regular bedroom, but in kind of a storage area. So yes, she was quick on her feet. She had made a quick decision. She saw what was going on. She took care of it, and took care of Joash and saved him. Queen Athaliah was murdering everyone that might take her power. Jehosheba saw what was coming. She grabbed little Joash, her nephew, and the grandson of the queen, and she hid him. I'm very curious. I was kind of thinking earlier, like, how did nobody realize that Joash hadn't been killed? You'd think there would have been like a count, like ticking them off, like, okay, we know the list, but somehow I was thinking maybe back to Snow White. You remember how the huntsman had been told, go out and kill Snow White, and he goes back to the wicked queen and he's like, yep, I did it, but he really didn't want to do it. It kind of reminds me of that. Like somehow somebody was like, I can't find him. She's gonna be mad if I tell her that I couldn't find him. So let's just tell her that we found him. So she grabbed him and she rescued him. Joash was very young when he was rescued, probably around a year, since it mentions that he needed a nurse. And for 6 years, Jehosheba and her husband, Jehoiada, kept Joash hidden in the temple. But Jehosheba was probably hiding too. It doesn't say that directly, but it says that the entire royal family was being murdered. And you got to think, I mean, here's a woman who is rising to power, Athaliah, and she knows that a woman can rise to power if it's possible, because she's sitting there doing it. So she might have been hunting for Jehosheba as well. Maybe not, since she was, in the priesthood area. Maybe she didn't consider her a threat, but I'm sure Jehosheba was quite nervous for what she had done. What if somebody finds out? She may or may not have had to stay in hiding the whole time, but a very stressful 6 years, I'm sure, for the entire family. Athaliah held on to this power for 6 years, but eventually the leader of Team Yahweh, chief priest Jehoiada, knew the moment had arrived to bring Joash out of hiding. Jehoiada's coup was very well planned. He assembled a group of foreign mercenaries to guard himself and the boy. The Jerusalem military that was under Athaliah, they were sort of like the little monkeys for the Wicked Witch of the West. They had been loyal to Queen Athaliah, so there was no way he could get them on Team Yahweh, and they were useless to Jehoiada, chief priest. And so he spent 6 years teaching Joash. The same time he was getting these people working. It refers several times in the passages to the people and things that he does to connect the people, so they were all prepared for this king to come up. I doubt that he told them, oh, hey, by the way, I'm Stacie and Joash, but he was beginning to work his work over the years with the right mercenaries that would eventually protect Joash and the people. And then at the same time, he was teaching Joash what it meant to be a godly king, everything that a godly king was supposed to know, and had to make sure that nothing was going to get in the way of the big reveal. So there's a very long passage that I'm not going to read all to you, but it talks about what happens then in the 7th year, when Jehoiada realized now is the time to bring Joash out for everyone. So it says that he showed his strength, and he made a covenant with the commanders and rulers of these units, and he gathered them together. He got the whole assembly, those are the peoples, to make a covenant with the king. And it says that he got a third, this is in red, a third of you priests and Levites over here. And he says, and he starts telling them where to station themselves around the temple in, I guess they're in Jerusalem. Yeah. And tells them, like, say, when you go on duty, you're going to do this. You're going to watch these doors. You third over here are going to be around the palace. You are going to be around this gate, and all the others are going to be in the courtyard. He had a strategy. He had everybody placed in just the right places, based on whether they were Levites or not Levites, the ones who were taking care of the temple. He had everybody stationed. And then he had others that he told them to stay close to the king. And then he gave the commanders of units of 100 the spears. And so there's like a lot, because there were commanders of units of 100. There's a lot of soldiers that he had called into action. And he gave him these spears and these shields that had been from King David's time, that had been stored in the temple. And everybody had a weapon. Everybody was ready to go. And he begins the big reveal of Joash. And all the people and all of these leaders were there and were ready for the big revolt, the rebellion, the coup, the big reveal. Everything was about to happen, with Joash being revealed as existing. He's here. We've stashed him. He's ready to do this job. I'm with him. You guys are not going to have to deal with this wicked queen anymore. And it says, Jehoiada brought out the king's son and put the crown on him. Very dramatic. He presented him with a copy of the covenant and proclaimed him king. They anointed him, and the people clapped and their hands waved a lot, and they shouted, "Yay, long live the king!" Everybody's freaking out and happy and excited. Yeah, it's a big day. And Athaliah heard. She has a way of hearing things and acting quickly, but she wasn't quite expecting this. She heard the sudden commotion and was taken by surprise. And Athaliah heard the noise of the people running and cheering the king. She went to them at the temple of the Lord. So I don't know how far away her little palace was, but she heard a big commotion. There were hundreds and thousands of people there, it looks like. And she got over there, and she looked, and there was the king standing by his pillar at the entrance. The officers and the trumpeters were beside the king, and all the people of the land were rejoicing and blowing trumpets, and musicians with their instruments were leading the praises. Then Athaliah tore her robes and shouted, "Treason! Treason!" Yeah, that didn't work. It wasn't really treason. It was a coup. It was justice. Then Jehoiada, the priest, commanded the military officers to arrest Athaliah and her followers. They were taken outside he said, go get her, but don't kill her in the temple, because this is the temple. So take her outside the temple, and then you can go ahead and kill her. So they definitely did that. Joash was taken to his new throne, and the high priest Jehoiada continued to advise him. He kept Joash following the ways of the Lord, and he advised him in other ways as well. It says that Joash did what was right in the eyes of the Lord all the years of Jehoiada the priest. That's a very important little phrase right there. Jehoiada also chose a couple of wives for him, and Joash had sons and daughters. So he was ruling for 40 years. Jehoiada, was into his later years, but he had kept advising him. He was right there by his side, and Joash was a great king until Jehoiada died. After his death, Joash started listening to the other court advisors and turned from the ways of the Lord. God sent prophets to warn him, but he even had Zechariah, who was Jehoiada's son, killed, stoned to death when he preached repentance. This is a guy he had basically probably been raised with. And Zechariah also followed the ways of the Lord, and he was a prophet. And he, after Jehoiada died, the priest, Zechariah, was a prophet, and he came to Joash a couple times, and I think there were some others, and he that also told Joash, listen, you gotta pay attention to obey the Lord's commands, or you will not prosper. It says, because you have forsaken the Lord, he has forsaken you. But they plotted against Zechariah, and by order of the king, they stoned him to death in the courtyard of the Lord's temple. See, they didn't even have enough couth to take him out of the temple, like his daddy had said. King Joash did not remember the kindness of Zechariah's father Jehoiada had shown him, but killed his son, who said, Zechariah got the last word. As he was dying, he said, may the Lord see this and call you to account. And that happened because Joash did not have a very good ending. It is possible that Zechariah was also the son of Jehosheba. We don't know that. We just know he was Jehoiada's son. But she most likely had some sort of hand in raising him and being around him, just like she had with Joash. They were probably raised together, and it makes one wonder how she might have felt if she'd been still living to see this man she had raised as her own kill one of her sons and make such bad choices. It must have been pretty devastating. When Jehoiada died, the people buried him. This is the priest, Jehoiada. When he died, the people buried him in the city of David among the kings. That's really remarkable. That doesn't really happen for a high priest. It's usually only the kings that get buried there. And it gives us insight, though, into this couple, because very likely Jehosheba, when she passed, she may have been buried with her husband as well. That was kind of a normal thing. But there was a respect for him, and most likely for her, for what she had done and rescuing Joash. And the honor that was given to him probably came to her as well. So that says a lot for the two of them. So besides Jezebel and her daughter Athaliah, there are two other evil queens listed in the Bible, just, because I like to have a well-rounded education on the shady ladies of the Bible. We know about Jezebel, and we know about Athaliah. Well, there was also Herodias, the queen of Galilee. Y'all remember her? She was the one that is remembered for bringing about the death of John the Baptist. He was dogging on her and her husband because they had gotten divorced and remarried, and all this other stuff was going on that was very improper. And she just kept saying, kill that guy, until she finally got her daughter to work it for her. So she was pretty evil. And there was another queen named Maacah. She was a queen of Judah, was married to King Rehoboam, the son of King Solomon, and she outlived her son and her husband into the reign of her grandson, and she was revered as the queen mother. She didn't ever rule or anything. She was just alive while, all the way to her grandson being king. And but she was removed. Asa, he was a good king, and she was acting so badly that he removed her as queen. He was like, Grandma, stop, you can't. And she was dabbling in some idol worship, and so he got rid of her. So good job for Asa, but Maacah, queen of Judah, she was a bad one. So we have 4 evil queens. in the Bible. So good for us to always know our shady ladies, in case anybody ever asks. So we have two women in this particular story that I like to kind of play off each other. We have Athaliah versus Jehosheba. This was royal power. This is two women who understood power, who understood what it meant to live in a place of command, of power, of being able to get what you want and do what you want it to an extent. This was royal power. Jehosheba in kind of two worlds, the religious world and the royal world. They both, you can see they both make very quick decisions that affected individuals, like killing or saving individuals, or nations, taking over a nation, or eventually for Joshua, saving a nation, bringing up Joash, and God saves the rightful heir from a woman by a woman. A woman against a woman is what is happening in this story. Just like with Jezebel, being a woman with power and position was not really what the problem was. It was what she did with it that mattered. The power was the problem, the evil was the problem, the wickedness was the problem, not the woman part. But this particular story, we can see woman versus woman. And the story redeems the stories of Jezebel and Athaliah. It doesn't redeem them. They're still horrible, evil, wicked women who did bad things. But it takes away the stigma that many try to heap on women of being these seductive manipulators that bring men down. Here's a woman, Jehosheba, who actually was the one who saved everything. So the idea of a woman being the problem, we talked about that with the pushing of the Jezebel spirit on any woman who kind of disagrees with a man, that some super fundamental Christians can push and things like that. Men and women will say those kind of things. But you can look at Jehosheba and say, well, I mean, we got her, we got some other great ones. We got a whole slew of great women who do amazing things to rescue men, to save men and cities and countries and power. Jezebel and Athaliah are not the ones that we're supposed to be holding up as what women are really like. So we also have two couples in this. We have Athaliah and Ahaziah. I'm going with the A's here. That's like mother and son. And then we also have Jehosheba and Jehoiada. Look, I got the A's and the J's there. These two couples are kind of a versus thing too. We had the two women versus each other. Well, let's look at how these two couples interacted, where great evil had been brought by one couple, the A's. God uses another couple, the J's, for great good. Their individual positions and gifts work together of the J's to save and continue the royal line, just as God had promised. David's line was supposed to continue forever. God had promised David, the line of David, King David, would continue forever. And of course, we know that eventually it became our Messiah, Jesus. And they, by rescuing Joash, that continued that line. The line came through Solomon and Jehoshaphat and Jehoram and was supposed to, and Ahaziah, and then was supposed to go to Joash, and Athaliah was trying to cut that off. She was trying to end everybody's line. She didn't know anything. She didn't care about that King David line. She just wanted to be in power, and that would have cut it off, except but Jehoiada but Jehosheba and but Jehoiada. So their gifts that they used, their individuality, and then together as a couple was what saved the nation, saved the line of David. One worked very quickly. Jehosheba, boom, made a quick decision, took care of things. And the other, Jehoiada, he had a long-term plan. He worked things for years, working on the son, teaching him, working on the people, preparing them for this new king, and to finally follow the ways of Yahweh. And then, of course, bringing in the mercenaries and all the things he did. So we have a very quick action and a very long planned out action. But both of these gifts of this couple working together, saving the day. It's a beautiful story of the redemption of the line of King David, eventually leading to Jesus, of course, bringing redemption to us all. It's the story that saves Christmas, is what Jehosheba and Jehoiada do. We love studying the women in the Bible. I love it. I'm having a great time with all these lessons, but there are so few of them that when we find some shady ladies, it can seem a little bit disappointing. Like, oh no, women, they're always giving us a bad rap. Come on, give us some good ones. And of course, there are some wonderful ones, and we've already been talking about a lot of them. And some of these, some take these few shady lady stories and they blow them up as this, they represent all women for all time. But those of us who are, a little more feminist, a little more egalitarian. We just want everyone to have equal opportunity to be awful, to be great, whatever it is. Don't look at it as a male or female thing. Look at it as a power of wickedness versus a goodness thing, and see what God is doing in people, individual gifts, individual callings, individual empowerings, or individual wickedness, whichever one is leading a person. That's what we're supposed to be looking at throughout the scriptures, not just, oh, it's a guy or a girl and what they're doing. And those kind of things are important too, not taking away from the male or the femaleness of it. But we want everybody to if you want to be awful, be awful. That's the way it works. I was thinking about, since I talked about the evil queens, I was thinking about some modern queens, we'll call them queens of history, some women who have done some things. This is just even in the last few years. I just did a little giggling and just noticed, of course, World War II, we have some amazing women who did some spy work and who did quick work, quick action. A woman, if you ever want to look any of these up, Irene Sindler was a woman who saved Jewish children. Sister Denise Bergen, I think Irene is the one that she's noted for saving. I think it's 2,500 children. She's the Schindler for women, the Schindler's List. She saved 2,500. Sister Denise Bergen, a Catholic nun, saved many children. There was a woman just recently, Natalia Ablayeva of Ukraine, that her story went public because she was trying to get out of Ukraine, as so many were, and she was getting up to a border crossing. She had her passport, she had her papers, and a dad was there with his kids, 2 children, and his wife was coming from Italy to try to meet him. The men were not allowed to leave, though. They just decided no men within a certain age group could leave Ukraine because they needed the soldiers. And so he handed this woman, Natalia, his 2 children, gave her the phone number of his wife that was coming, and she took these children by train until she could find the mom and handed them off. That was quick action, quick work. She had a quick decision to make, just like Jehosheba, to save these children in a crisis. Amazing story. Another story that we don't really know all of it yet was a woman who, you may have heard this story in Uvalde, who the horrible tragedy that happened down there, but her children were in the school, and she said, I'm getting my children. And she'd heard about what was going on, and she got arrested because she was fighting and screaming and telling those cops let her inside. She knew exactly which classroom her kids were in. They finally took her out of the handcuffs they'd put her in. Then she climbed a freaking fence, got into the door, got to her kids, told the teachers some things that were going on, was able to help some other people, but got her kids out quickly. There was nothing that was going to stop her. It's that quick action and that parent, I want to call it mama bear, but I think it's just a parent thing that says, I'll do what it takes to save my kids. But a lot of times women, we have to make those quick decisions. And I always hope that I can be one of those women. But sometimes it's not, very few of us will ever really be in a situation where we have to rescue somebody that quickly. We have to make a decision like that so quickly. Sometimes it's just simply doing something kind or nice to somebody when other people are not being kind or nice, saying a better word about somebody, not participating in the gossip, saying, well, I think that person's okay, when everybody else is dogging on them, or smiling at somebody, or complimenting somebody, or praying for somebody who is in need in a Walmart. All of those things are a part of the saving that we can do of people. And I realize that that's kind of my theme all the time at the end of these lessons, as I always tend to go toward pay attention, take care of people, do justice, love mercy. I want to always do that. It seems to be my kind of my personality, so it kind of comes through, and it's what I'm always wanting to be able to do. But in this particular story, I mean, it is everything that Jehosheba is she is this woman who took the moment, and she this and she did what she had to do right then. She did what was right then, and it was scary and it was terrible, and it was a long-term thing as well. It wasn't just quick. She didn't just like take him and hand him off to somebody else. She took care of this kid. The quiet rebellion which chooses goodness, the rebellion that we can have against the evil and the wickedness around us, that chooses goodness or kindness and love over wickedness and badness and pride or just stupidity. Sometimes people are just stupid, y'all, and we just have to be better than them, is what most of us have the opportunity to accomplish. So look for those moments. Look for a moment of goodness, kindness, love over stupidity or pride or wickedness. And if you have a chance to save a kid from a burning building or a wicked queen, please do that as well. Go for it. Don't hesitate. Look for all those moments that you can. And always you go here for all the lessons that you have not seen yet. Does anybody have any thoughts, questions, ideas, arguments, anything I messed up you're wondering about? I don't know if you guys know that whole story or not. Most of us have heard of Athaliah, but not everybody knows the full story of all the rest of them. Anybody? Nothing? I was brilliant once again. Mel, did you have something?
No, I just said you're brilliant.
Oh yeah, I wanted to make sure that got on recording. No, I didn't hear what you said. All right, you guys, I'm going to end this, and then y'all stick around for just a second so I can give you a couple of notes for our next week's lesson. But thank you guys. Keep studying those shady ladies and seeing how God what he wants to teach you. Hopefully take a deeper dive into these stories than just a quick reading. If I can figure out how to, there we go.